PSA is moving the goalpost, which is affecting the value of millions of cards most likely. And what we're gonna see is a huge market shift and why it's screwing over every single person that you could ever think of that has got a graded card or has sent off graded cards. Now, let's go over the rules. Previously, we were looking at PSA, which allowed a 60-40 centering of a card on the left and right lateral margins of it. I actually like this little wiggle room because it's, in my opinion, we don't cut the cards. We're not the part of that. There's a human factor, like you're just at the mercy of what you pull, that I think that there should be some laxity to this. I think what was intended from cards was to make sure that they were just in great condition, and centering was kind of a factor of that. But I look at that and that's my personal opinion. I actually liked that part of it. However, the 60-40 rule has now been canceled, and they are saying on their official website for PSA that it is now a 55-45 on the edges for centering of any card. And we know that this is going to create a lot of drama because essentially this was the most effective way that you could increase your cards without having to go buy a bunch of their cards. And it was a way to actually encapsulate them, authenticate them, all that kind of stuff that they market. But really, everyone was worried about condition, and that is kind of gone from the wayside. We must remember, how did we get here? Everybody that collected from the original Pokemon that we learned, our Charizards were not worth $1 million because we put them in crappy binders, which is why we have the new binders, which is why we're also seeing everybody during the 2020, 2021 boom during COVID was now realizing that their cards were not as high tier as they thought, and they were not going to yield the value that they thought. And so now they are learning and they're saying, okay, we will grade them. They did that during 2020, but PSA got backed up and people weren't getting their cards for a year. That slowed down, and now we're back to where we're at again. There is a centering app for you to kind of pre-grade. I will say you can use this to kind of help you figure out if your cards are center with this new rule, but I would not take that as gospel. And that is because it's up to the grader, right? Like, we all know that that's a factor here, and it is the human factor. Now, I'm going to go through the chain of events of how this is going to rock the market. Now, first off, I believe a lot of this is to compete with other companies. I'll get to that, but I have cards I sent off that I thought were in the 60-40 rule. So I've paid my PSA membership, plus I paid to send them off for each card that's being graded under the idea that this was the 60-40 rule, and now we're seeing this change. So that's why I'm a little upset by it. And essentially, I would say a lot of people with this understanding, same as me, would have not sent these cards in if this was the case, because there's not much meat on the bone for a 9 grade versus a 10 grade. And they would have said, I'll wait, see how the card performs, and then move forward. Now, I am not a person that's going to grade and instantly flip to make money. That's not what I do. I grade for myself, and they're in my collection. I don't even have any cards for sale right now, and I haven't posted anything. But what this means is that if somebody sent this off, they may have to wait for the market to correct to these changes, which could take years because of this. And essentially, they're going to have to hold on to these 9s unless they want some kind of hit. And let's be honest, it's going to take years for PSA to show the consistency in order to say, like, okay, a 10 is really a 10, or a 9 is really a 9, or whatever else. And that is where I have issues with this, because you just threw everybody's thing off here, essentially. To get back to my third point of this is they are doing this because other grading companies such as Beckett, CGC, Tag, whatever else there is, SGC, there's all these other companies that are eating away at that market share because of quality. And again, that's laughable. A lot of you guys will have differing opinions, but they are obviously making changes in their positioning of the market to compete. They have to. And what they've realized is their quality has gone down and their reputation is being withered away by these other bottom feeders, and they're doing this before they get too big. On top of that, a lot of those other grading companies, besides CGC, which kind of backtracked on the 4 different types of grading that were subgraded, Every other company provides subgrades that I can think of besides PSA and CGC. So I will say, I think that in order to keep up, PSA will have to bring those into their factor, especially as people are saying they like their stuff graded in a certain slab because of a certain aesthetic. Maybe it's time for PSA to kind of go into their own thing and try and create some marketing pressure from this, because right now they are just kind of this blank standard red, white, and black label. Some other changes that we're seeing here is we are having a massive influx in grading, which is happening at the instantaneous point of opening a pack. Where if you look at a lot of other eras of Pokemon, that play, or even cards in general, that play was not actually the case. A lot of people were like, oh, maybe I should. That card's gone up in value. I could send it in. I've held on to it, not really done much. But now everybody's instantaneously sending it off to them. This is meant to be like a bell curve, where at the tail end of the front half of it are the 10s. There's supposed to be very few. But when you look at stuff like the Moonbryon and other cards that are highly valuable, you're seeing it is front-loaded and not evenly distributed, and it kind of devalues the 10 or makes it the 10 or bust kind of market that we're seeing right now. A good comparison example of this is vintage. You see a good distribution of very little 10s, mostly mid-range 5 to maybe 7s, right? And then you get the tail end on the other side of that of less than that. And that brings me into this part of grading with modern stuff, and I think they've kind of already, delved too deep into this. Is the idea is, I think there's two grading systems. There's truly 1 to 10, okay? And then there is like our school brain, where a lot of us learned 70% above is passing, 80% above is like a B, A and above, like those kinds of grading where like we want to side to that side of it. Where if you look at how grading is done, you're not seeing all numbers across that grading scale being evenly distributed. So what do I think is going to happen with the grading at PSA is there's going to be less grading more than likely, but that is something that I think they're not having issues with. They probably have too much, not enough resources. So they are able to do this to mitigate more of the market, bring up their brand as far as like trustworthiness, authentication, stuff like that. However, what we're going to see is like, if you do not have a 10 card, you don't think is a 10, you are more than likely going to hold on to that card, put it in a sleeve, maybe sell it. How many hands is that going to trade? How many bumps, dings, whatever else? What you're seeing is a lot of cards, maybe from the 2016 era, that you're seeing it's either graded or it wasn't. And the ones that weren't graded are essentially like beat to crap. And so really it's just the ones that are graded that you're going to want to seek, because they've just already been encapsulated and held in time. And it's important to realize that there is value to that in the long term. But if you're looking for these short-term crypto bro trades, you're going to play the 9-10 game, and that's pretty much it. I want to say that there is a sentiment in the market right now where people are saying pretty much, if it's a 10, awesome, get it. If it's not, don't get it. And I think that's going to bite a lot of people, because it is mathematically and statistically impossible to have an entire collection of all 10s. And I'm not saying go out and buy a 5 or a 6. Like, if you want to save your money that way, you totally could, and break it out and sell it, raw as well. But, I look at that where I'm just like, I think that is the mentality of a lot of people, that if it's not a 10, it's trash. And I believe the people that are buying 9s and 8s are probably going to be happier, because they're going to see over time some small growth. May not be as much as that 10, but they are going to see growth and not have to pay that expensive price tag that goes along with it. I believe that the point of grading was to encapsulate, right? And we always talk about that, but where we end up kind of crossing roads here is we had people that probably sold a lot of fake cards, a lot of thrash cards, and deceptive cards, that a unit of measure, a third party, is allowed to grade that to then help you as a consumer know you're getting a quality product, where before we probably had a lot of people that were just unhinged, kind of playing the game, and people that weren't happy with that. My next point is that we understand that the grading stricter is kind of what we're seeing from these other places, but My frustration with this is the 60-40 split thing, or any of these things that we've seen of the grading of the corners, the sides, the surfaces, you know, all that kind of stuff, is it's already inconsistent. There's already humans that are in the factor of that. And that's okay. I understand that's how we have to do it with the limitations that we have right now. But I do not believe by making it a 55-45 is going to change everything, because there is human error to this. And I'm hoping, not because I want people to be out of a job, but that PSA can lead this and use some kind of technology company and acquire a tag or some other company that is using AI to garner information to provide automated reports back to the consumer would be a lot more effective in this situation. Lastly, I want to say they should show examples of, if you have a ding like this, your grade can go down to this. If you have centering like this, your grade can go to this. That way, when you are pre-grading your cards, you can say like, oh, I understand a corner ding could, you know, bring it down to this or whatever. But that transparency, I think, is going to maybe come in, you know, due time, as they're obviously competing against these smaller companies. But until then, PSA has a big ship. It's going to take a long time to turn it. And if they don't, we're going to see these other companies eat up the market share. So I do think over time, this will bring that curve back to a more normal bell curve of averages and things like that. But that's just kind of where I stand on it. I'm not a fan of this. And I think they could have maybe done a better rebrand of like a newer pristine 10 or whatever else, to kind of be on par with the other companies, because right now this just mixes up what is already graded. And I think if you are sending something in after the fact and you think it's going to be a 9 for sure, might not be worth your grading. Who knows? It's really up to you guys, card by card, timeline by timeline, where you're at, where your money's at, you know, where your circumstances are at. So let me know down in the comments below, what do you think about the new PSA grading that has essentially kind of rocked the hobby world?